The lawn has become a surprisingly contentious issue in our gardens. Once upon a time, we all wanted a smart green lawn with stripes and neat edging, and all the gardening advice has always been tailored towards that end. But now there are other options, and also some people feel that that kind of a lawn is too much work, or it costs too much to maintain, or it's not environmentally friendly. So in order to make decisions about how we're going to treat our lawns, we have a small one in the front and a larger one at the back. And also to help you make the decision about how you would like to treat your lawns, I've visited and talked to one of the world's leading lawn experts, David Hedges Gower, who's chair of the Lawn Association, who provide accurate and modern advice on how to look after your lawn. And they've got a YouTube channel and they run courses both for professionals and homeowners. I'll put links to the Lawn Association and to any other resources we mention in the description below. And if you're new here, the Middle-Sized Garden uploads weekly with tips, ideas and inspiration for your garden. So if you'd like to see the videos when you open up YouTube, tap subscribe. David has a number of lawns around his property, some belonging to neighbouring houses and some are his, but he actually has access to them all and helps look after them all. And he explained to me that each of those is treated differently, and so I was able to look at how different lawns look and how you can treat them. So David, let's start with the smart lawn with the green stripes. Now, does this really have to be as much work and to take up as much resources as we're led to believe?
Having a manicured striped lawn, in my opinion, is no more difficult than having a happy, healthy lawn that's cut with a robot or anything else. You know, the perfect lawn's the one that's perfect for you. And perfect to me is obviously different to everybody else or the next person, but I love grass. I think it's, you know, the world's most dominant plant and it should be savoured. It grows all across our country, but we need to think about how do we manage it. What do we aerate for? What do we scarify for? What do we feed for? What do we water for? You know, they've all got to have a purpose.
And he's got one perfect lawn, as it were, in front of his house. It's 120 square metres and he spent about an hour on it in early spring. And what he did was he scarified it and he aerated it and he did some moss control and he added some fertiliser, and he said for that amount of lawn it was about an hour's work. And he mows that weekly. He does use a petrol mower. He does it in stripes and it's a smart lawn. He doesn't irrigate the lawn, and indeed he doesn't irrigate any of his lawns. He uses an organic lawn fertiliser called True Grass, which is available from the Lawn Association, and it's a byproduct of food waste. So once again, this is reducing the environmental impact of the perfect lawn. But some people find that keeping this sort of a lawn looking really good takes up too much time, effort and money. Well, I mean, one of the things is, of course, is that whatever surface you choose, whether it's a smart lawn, an artificial lawn, a meadow lawn, stone, brick, gravel, I mean, it all needs maintenance, doesn't it? There's no such thing as a surface inside or outside the house which you never have to touch. No one would ever say, oh, you can have a kitchen floor you never have to clean. There is no such thing.
No, quite right. I mean, I've got a lawn, obviously, you know, that's pretty close to that, but, you know, it's got robot mowers on it. It's got natural grass species growing on it. Don't do anything to it. It's trouble-free. I think you can nowadays have everything. You know, you've got robots, you've got battery power. Battery power, obviously, like anything, comes with its own contentious issue, whether lithium is being mined or whatever it is. But technically speaking, if you start off with good soil, and that's probably where 99% of people fall down. If you start off with good soil and good grasses that do all the work for you, you can, added with battery power or robot technology or whatever, you can have a trouble-free lawn. A lot more trouble-free than probably having a plastic one, for example, where you have got to get a hoover out, as we've seen on social media at the moment.
As I said, he doesn't irrigate this lawn at all, and he doesn't use weed killer, he doesn't use moss control, and he doesn't use fertiliser. This lawn is a virtually no-effort lawn. And if you are looking at reducing your effort in the garden, it might well be worth considering a slightly less than perfect lawn, a robot mower, and not worrying too much about when it goes brown in the summer. David told me that he thinks that most people, certainly in the UK now, do not irrigate their lawns when it gets dry. As you can see, this lawn here is really dry. We've had quite a dry period, but I am metered and it would be absolutely unaffordable to try and spray this lawn with water regularly to keep it green. It would use up too much water from an environmental standpoint, and it would cost us a lot of money, and it would take time. And I know from experience that once this lawn has gone brown, when the rains come again, it will bounce back. So we've had the perfect lawn and we've had the no maintenance lawn. The next option is the wildflower lawn. When I interviewed wildlife garden expert Joel Ashton about his top tips for a wildlife friendly garden, almost his number one tip was put the lawnmower away. But anyway, we did something called No Mow May this year, and we stopped mowing our lawn completely for the whole of May and actually for about 3/4 of June. So we went 7 weeks without mowing the lawn, and you can see the result here. When we did mow it, it was actually more effort to get it back to the short thing, but it still wasn't as much effort as mowing that much lawn would have been over 7 weeks. So I think the important thing to realise there is you can experiment with your lawn.
So you can always bring it back to, I mean, I do play around with lawns, you know, I do videos, I do tests, I train people even on bits of grass here, and we're moving the heights up and down and, you know, trying to change a dynamic, trying to alter a grass species when we don't want to, just to see what it might do and whether it'll outcompete. So we change all the time.
I did really love having the longer lawn grass, and I could really feel the benefits for wildlife. When we stepped out into the garden, it felt as if the garden was absolutely humming. And we did think about keeping certainly a patch of it longer on a permanent basis, because that can look very nice if you just mow paths through it or you keep a patch of longer grass. But my husband was doing the mowing, and he who has the lawnmower has the final say. And he really said, we'd been discussing this for too long. We really, we were having a slight argument about it. And in the end, he just thought it was easier to just carry on mowing. And at the back of David Hedges Gower's house, there is an area which used to, when he originally came to live there, it was just flat. It was just a lawn, like a golf course almost. And it was mowed with a ride-on mower, and he has allowed all of that to grow longer, and he mows past through it, but he does very little else to it, so it is a low maintenance lawn. Supposing I decide to have a few years of the longer grass and then I decide actually I would prefer to go back to having a mown lawn, will I have destroyed my lawn by leaving it to grow long for a couple of years?
Of course, if you've got, for example here where I've got native grasses, yes, I can chop them down. But the more I start to mow them, once I've chopped them down, the more they're just going to get thicker and thicker. We won't even need reseeding. In fact, I've, taken on many lawns where we've done exactly that. Chopped them down, not bothered with overseeding, because we know that if this grass starts to grow up and grow this way, it's quite simple. So absolutely, you can chop it down. So it's going to have some effect, but you can pretty much get away with anything with most grass species.
The next option is the nectar lawn, which I've spoken about before and which I discovered when I interviewed Jane Moore, head gardener at the Bath Priory Hotel, and also the author of Planting for Butterflies and Planting for Wildlife. And this is quite a good compromise, and it is one I think we have settled on now for our back lawn, which is that you mow every 2 to 3 weeks. You allow the small flowers like the daisies and the clover to come up and to provide food for pollinators. You then cut it down and it goes back to looking like a traditional lawn again. Of course, it does look a bit shaggy in its 2nd or 3rd week. I asked David if there was any long-term issues about how the lawn might change if you did this, and he said that this kind of mowing will enable the daisies and the buttercups and the other wildflowers to grow at the expense of the lawn grasses, so you will get slightly less percentage of lawn grasses. However, you can actually correct that. If you decide to go back to a traditional lawn, then regular mowing will actually reduce the amount of wildflowers and weeds in it. Now, at the heart of all these different choices, apart from your own time, effort and money, there's the issue is a lawn environmentally friendly? Because certainly when I went to BBC Gardeners World Live this year, one of the borders was, the lawn as a green desert. And there have been quite a few studies to show that a traditional lawn, which is irrigated, mown twice weekly with a petrol mower, has weed killers and moss control and fertilisers on it, is not an environmentally friendly lawn. However, much of this has got to do with 2 factors. One is where you live and one is what you do to your lawn. And taking the one of where you live first, is that if you live in a temperate climate where grasslands and forests are a natural part of the environment, then a lawn is really just an extension of that. Most of our lawn grasses here in the UK are as what David calls native grasses, bents and fescues, he says. One very important gardening principle is right plant, right place. And if your environment is naturally attuned to grasses, then a lawn is the right thing to do, because a lawn absorbs pollution and dust. It absorbs carbon dioxide. It creates an environment for soil and other microorganisms, and it's part of the food chain, as you can see when you see birds hopping across your lawn and picking things out of it. We've recently had heat waves here in Britain, although I know many of you laugh at our British heat waves, but they can cause deaths and problems. And a recent study by the University of Manchester pinpointed that the areas where there are the fewest gardens and parks, so the fewest amount of lawn and trees, are the ones where people suffer from the heat the most, and that is obviously inner city areas. So lawns are an important part of the environment. In terms of what you do to them, if you don't irrigate them and you don't use weed killers, and you use an organic fertiliser, or you allow lawn clippings to re-fertilise the lawn, and if you use a battery mower or of course a hand mower, then you're reducing the environmental impact a great deal. However, there are parts of the world which have tried to have traditional English lawns, and the native grasses don't make lawns, so they have to put non-native grasses in. The climate is too dry, a lot of irrigation has to go on, a lot of effort to try and keep that lawn the way it is, and that clearly is not helpful. There are lots of other wonderful options now in gardening, such as dry gardens, and I'll put a link to how to create a dry garden in the description below. Of course, I probably have to mention artificial grass here, because many people are taking their lawns out, particularly in small city lawns, and putting in artificial grass. Now, one of the things to make clear is that artificial grass is not low care. You won't have to mow it, but you do have to clean it. You often have to brush it, you have to add sand, and like all surfaces in the garden, it gets weeds and you will have to weed it. There are quite a few artificial grass front gardens where I am, and one of them has got incredibly weedy because no one has done anything to it. The other is quite well looked after, and I can see that they're weeding it about every 3 to 4 weeks, but there usually are weeds in it. And it sometimes rucks up, and I can see that they're pushing it down. The other thing to remember about artificial grass is that even if it's guaranteed for 10 or 15 years, it can start to look faded or tatty or curl up before that. So your outlay, which is considerable, it can be anything like 35 to 60 pounds a square metre, you will have to replace it at some point in the next decade. So that's a cost to be added in as well. And of course, if you have to keep the grass clean using water, you may use much more water on an artificial lawn, keeping it clean, than you would on a traditional lawn, simply because you don't have to water a traditional lawn, you can just sit it out. Artificial lawns also, if you are concerned about the environment, they do deprive the soil and the microorganisms, the worms, of a good habitat. They deprive the wildlife of good habitat, and they're made of plastics, and indeed they can't be recycled. There is apparently a recycling plant somewhere in Europe, but it would be quite difficult to get your artificial lawn at the end of its life in 8 or 10 years' time to that recycling plant. So there's considerable issues on recycling it. And of course, in a heat wave, the artificial lawn does not act like a traditional lawn. It doesn't absorb heat. It is very hot. It adds to the heat of the environment. So in terms of our lawns, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you'll know we have a couple of patches of lawn out the front, and I've been turning them into a mini meadow. And I'm in the second year of this, and not many flowers came through on the first year, and more flowers have come through on the second year. But I think it's not really working. I've really valued all your comments, and as quite a few of you have pointed out, it's quite tricky to have this mini meadow when there's already quite a lot of shrub planting around the outside. It's quite a formal area. There are shrubs and roses. And firstly, the long grass is preventing me from getting to those shrubs and roses and actually looking after them. And secondly, there are 2 big trees in the front garden, and that's casting a lot of shade, so I'm not getting the level of flowers that I would if it was more open. I've seen some really lovely mini meadows in front gardens around me, but they're often in quite plain open spaces in front of, say, new builds and things, and they soften a new build beautifully. But there's just a bit too much going on in our mini meadow. So what we have decided to do is to cut it down and treat it as a normal lawn from about June onwards, but to stop mowing in January and to allow it to be a spring bulbs mini meadow. And then after the last spring bulbs have gone over, it needs to be left for a few weeks so that the spring bulbs can get all the nutrition for their next year's flowers, and then we'll mow it. And I think that that might be a better route through. Gardening is quite a traditional activity, and sometimes the traditional ways of doing things are best and sometimes they're not. But I think with lawns, we've really reached a point where we have to question whether we do something or we don't do it to our lawns. And so I would call this a sort of very much about how you develop your own gardening style, and I'll put a playlist that will help you further on developing your own gardening style at the end of this video, and let me know what you think, because people are beginning to feel quite passionate about this issue. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.